Wanted to set up this panel session so that we can actually not just talk about what Coinsilium does, but also what these companies does, but where we see the opportunity for us as effectively startups in Gibraltar, what support it gives us. But we were discussing separately that it would be good to kind of fast forward 5 years, and if everyone does what they are promising to do, what is this jurisdiction going to look like? What else could it have? So that's the sort of framework of the the panel session that we want to sort of talk about, and we can hopefully look at all the different areas of the technology office, and also you can bring us back down to earth when we get a little bit ahead of ourselves. So perhaps I can start, Joey, if you can sort of give a little bit of perspective as to where Gibraltar is right now and how you see all this stuff fitting in, and what does the future look like?
Wow, that's a bit of a curveball question. But look, I mean, I think I'm not going to pitch Gibraltar in Gibraltar, but we are definitely in a very much sort of vanguard situation. So I think when the law came into effect years ago, everyone knew that we were sort of one of the first or the first jurisdiction to try and do that. But I find it really interesting. So today, Singapore passed its new payment services law, all very interesting. They've excluded massive chunks of safeguarding or custody-related requirements, even in the basic legal framework. So that's actually sort of out of sync with the more global financial action task force guidance notes that were issued in June last year. I'm not going to go into lots of little details and get the specific, but there are lots of areas where we've actually positioned ourselves as so far ahead of things like the fifth anti-money laundering directive and others that it's pretty unbelievable. But I mean, saying that, groups like RSK, IOV, and having groups like Diego here and committed, I think the really interesting thing for me is sort of what the future has or the opportunities that lie ahead with groups like that. So when you look at the names of licensees that exist in Gibraltar, they're actually exactly in line with what Albert was talking about. So we're not just attracting naysayers, we've got really substantive core groups of companies and technological infrastructure support to help develop that. I was at it was actually a very interesting discussion in Barcelona last week, and it was all these sort of central banks were there talking about the use of the technology. Everyone talks about now central bank issued sort of digital currencies, etc. Everyone talks about Libra and everything else, which we're also involved with. But the interesting question there was, everyone talks about blockchain technology, and they all say, it's the solution. So it's the solution to absolutely everything that anyone has ever considered, from ordering at a bar to getting a bus to everything. The opportunities are there, but sometimes you've got to focus on where the problems are and what are the difficulties that it creates. So it might create solution A, and what is problem B that attaches to that solution. And much of the time, it is technological, and much of the time it is infrastructure based. So that's sort of why I would love to see, if we're talking about what the future holds, the law and the framework is there. The infrastructure groups are here. Some of the largest players are here. So what are the other industries doing? What are the other industries in Gibraltar that already exist, and other industries in the world? What are they actually doing to adopt the technology, and how can we help them to develop that? So that's a kind of semi-technical question, which I'm laying off to Diego to now pitch the actual infrastructure solution to all blockchain-related problems that could ever exist in the world. So, Diego.
The magic bullet.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I think blockchain is ideal to take care of your children by night when you go out. It's like, I think, but you can use it for other things. It's like people, no, but I think it's, I will do because you talk about jurisdictions, elections, and the truth is I roam all over the world before deciding to come to Gibraltar. So it was not by chance or a single option. I really went to Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland, you name it. I studied some US jurisdictions as well. So you name it, I went there. And what I found is that in Gibraltar I had a regulator and a law firm that really understood the nature of what we were doing. That they were really trying to understand and create a proper framework for this technology to evolve. And technology is an enabler. It's not basically the solution itself. It's like we need to shape technology and give the proper context for technology to be helpful for society. So you cannot think of technological solutions in isolation from regulation, from governments, from the industries. And so that's what I found in Gibraltar. I found the proper conditions to have a meaningful discussion, a meaningful conversation to put these technologies to the service of technology. Our organization, that was formerly known as RSK, now stands as IOV Labs. That means Internet of Value, because that's what we think we are building. We are building networks to store and transfer value that will be interconnected and will form this Internet of Value. That much like the Internet of Information that was enabled openness in the realm of communications, knowledge access, entertainment, this Internet of Value will bring those values, redundantly, to the store and transfer value. And I use the word value because it goes beyond money. It's anything that is valuable for human beings. So it's your identity. More importantly, one of the emerging patterns of these technologies is the creation of reputational identities, which I think is a key enabler for financial inclusion, which is at the core of our purpose, because no matter how rich or poor you were born, you always have a reputation. Over your life, you build a reputation, and these technologies enable you, anybody in the world, to create a trustable source for that reputation. So once my reputation is recorded in these blockchains, in these open networks, I can interact with people that doesn't know me, that doesn't have a previous interaction with me, and then it opens new markets. It creates the possibility to access financial services that today are only available for those with collateral. Only those with a house, a car, or a formal paycheck can access those services. So this simple thing becomes the key to solve financial inclusion. So that's how powerful this technology is. But again, we need the framework, the regulatory framework. We need the collaboration of the governments to make this happen and to adapt regulation. Because regulation is built based on historical behavior of society. So when new tools appear, we need to adapt regulation to these new tools and new behaviors of the society. And the former regulations very likely are not going to adapt perfectly to these new regulations. A good example of this is Skype. Skype changed the landscape of the telecommunication industry globally and was unregulated for 10, 12 years. And finally, regulation caught up, and now we have the proper framework for that. But it's, again, a dialogue between regulation and technology. It's not it's not a picture, it's a movie, as I like to say. It's a process. And we are walking that process or walking that journey together with the Gibraltarian government, together with Isola. Coinsilium is an early supporter and investor of our organization, and also now we have a partnership to expand our presence in Asia. So I'm really very happy and also grateful with Gibraltar for opening the doors to us to actually put this technology to the service of society.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, just because it's a kind of panel thing, when you were talking about identity and reputation, and maybe it's something that you can explain. So if I think of a WeChat system or a WePay system, there are different mechanisms that exist in different parts of the world. Arguably, kind of Line in Japan and Kakao, whatever it's called in Korea, and there are other sort of networks that have already started to do that without the technology, or tried to do that without the technology. So how do you see like blockchain in this example as a solution provider to something that others are already trying to?
Well, the differential value there is openness and trust, no? Because if you are running reputational models that are controlled by a single company, let's say Kakao, Line, or Telegram, the point of trust is put into that company. And we have seen in recent years how many industries have been disrupted by what is called sharing economies, driven by reputation, like Uber, Airbnb. But the truth is those systems are closed systems because the reputation, that is the core value of those systems, it's handled by a single corporation. In these platforms, the reputation is portable, so the user is in control of the reputation. The reputation is built, you build reputation as a transfer of reputation between parties, so both parties will retain the reputational records. So if a bank gives you a loan, that information will remain on the bank and on yourself. The difference with traditional systems is in traditional systems you cannot exit the system or take your reputation elsewhere. So I think that's the key value of having a neutral platform, an open platform to record the reputational events. No?
Actually, yeah, I would like to add to that. So as you were saying, you can't take your reputation from one place to another, right? I'll give you two examples. One is my personal example. So I used to live in Singapore for 7 years. I built up a really good credit history in Singapore. I used to pay back my credit card bills on time. I used to pay back my debt on time. Then I moved to London last year, and I'm non-existent in the credit history and Experian and in all those systems, right? I cannot get a SIM card even. I can't get a postpaid SIM card, although I have a really good credit history in Singapore, right? That's just one example. Again, I'm quite fortunate. I'm sitting here today, but there are other people. So there are refugees coming from Syria to Germany. You have highly qualified people like doctors or engineers, but their degrees are not valid anymore in the new country because the university has been bombed or something, and hence these people, they cannot really contribute to the new economy. And I think that's what blockchain can solve, not completely and not in 1 year, but I think that's what at Indorse we are building. We are building a reputation system based on a sharing economy, to have your skills recorded on the blockchain, and you can transfer it from one place to another. You are not constrained by geographies or jurisdictions or regulations in that case.
And do you think, so if you have, let's say we've talked about that, well, a very common theme is sort of global payments. Would you say that the JP Morgan plan of this sort of payment coin system for free membership banks to allow for interbank payments was using the technology? Would you say that wasn't really the technology because it's a centralized ledger, or would you say that it's a private functioning use of the technology?
I don't think it's about the technology, as Diego was saying earlier, right? So the technology exists, but again, a simple example. In Singapore, or in any other country for that matter, if you go to a bank and get a bank account, and again with the same bank, if you have to open a business account, you have to do the KYC all over again, although they have that information with them. So as a director, you have to do the KYC all over again. Now again, if you want to apply for a credit card, you might have to do all the KYC and all the procedures all over again. So, and that's just in the same country, in the same jurisdiction. So I think technologies like blockchain could enable some fluidity there.
I use one perspective that is useful to me to understand this. Is like in the early days of the web, we had intranets. There is the use of the web technology within confined environments and under the control of a corporation. Indeed, it was funny because I was part of the pioneers of the web back in the 90s, and I recall in 97, 98, people saying, no, the intranet is the future, much like people are saying today, blockchain is the future, not Bitcoin, not the open networks like RSK or Ethereum. They are saying, no, blockchain is the future. And now we know that the intranets were a useful tool, but they didn't change how the world was working. So the true disruptive technological revolution was the open networks, not the web protocol itself. And it's the same thing. Is the blockchain protocol is just that, it's a protocol, but then you have a security model that is attached to that protocol that enables different use cases. And it's not that bad that you could say that intranets of value are bad per se. I mean, it's good that JP Morgan is using blockchain and creating their intranet of value to create their own currency and control that circuit, but that doesn't change the nature of the financial system. The traditional financial system with different technological tools was always built based on a custodian, on a control entity of a private network for the transfer of value, and then agreements between private networks for the transfer of value to simulate or create some interoperability that ended up giving the user the feeling of a global financial system, but it was multiple isolated networks interconnected with different agreements, and the friction between those private networks is actually what created the cost we have in the financial system. The financial system we have reached its maximum efficiency or inefficiency, depending on how you want to see it. Oh, sorry. So I think in that sense, the revolutionary element here is the openness and interoperability that can be provided only when you have a network that it's run at least for multiple parties, like like in a federation, and ideally in open networks like Bitcoin, RSK, or Ethereum, where the infrastructure is run in a neutral way. There's no direct interest in running the protocol versus the applications that run on top of that protocol.
But you've mentioned, it's just interesting because you mentioned like just now Bitcoin, RSK, and Ethereum, and like you've also talked about the old Internet of Communications or whatever. So I think everyone knows like the internet is built on one language, so the sort of whatever TCP/IP, etc. Do you think that the blockchain of the future, do you think that in 10 years' time, everyone that's here will automatically be using the technology without really knowing it, but there will be one sort of core language that everything is built on, or will there be many, many different blockchains that are interoperable without us knowing about it, and that's relevant to, yeah.
So I think, TCP/IP is like the really bottom layer, but on top of TCP/IP that only moves basic information back and forth, you have different protocols that are tailored to different use cases. So you have protocols to stream audio and video, you have protocols to share knowledge like the web. So actually you have a diversity of protocols. If you will, the blockchain and the consensus protocols, you can see kind of a TCP/IP equivalent, but then the things you build on top, the programming languages like Solidity in the case of RSK and Ethereum, or the script language of Bitcoin, are kind of the application level protocols. So I think we are, and the interoperability is still being explored. Indeed, RSK was the first one to connect two open networks, interconnecting Bitcoin with RSK, and now we are working on a trustless or trust minimized bridge between Ethereum and RSK. So that will be the first version of this vision we were sharing about the Internet of Value. But we are in early days. I mean, the interoperability still needs work. We are like exploring models and pushing the frontier on this.
Yeah, I think there are going to be multiple blockchains which will exist simultaneously. And each of these blockchains will have, as Diego was saying, will have some specific application or specific utility in the end. For example, R3 Corda might be used for financial applications. Ethereum is a general purpose smart contract system, same with RSK. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be like one blockchain dominating everything. There are going to be multiple players, definitely. Yeah.
One thing I want to touch on as well is, as my entrepreneurial background when I was witnessing the growth of the internet, you were much more embedded in the development, and I wasn't as involved in that, but I was investing, and I was very keen to actually see it go, to see how it would move as an early adopter in any kind of technology. But the educational side of things was something that really amazed me, because in London we started seeing these schools opening up that were teaching people how to use the application. When it became apparent the use of this web technology and Microsoft's dominance and all these new tools were spawning new businesses, new business opportunity, and education training became huge. Now, I know, Diego, with RSK, you've got an initiative with the university here, and education is a big, big focus. But where do you see that in going, and when do you think that we'll reach a tipping point where, or if you will indeed, where it'll become apparent that people will need to understand more about this technology or they'll get left behind? And also, going forward, do you actually see that as essential, an opportunity, or something that perhaps developers will take care of the solutions and you won't need to actually have that level of education?
I think, yes, education is key. I think education is in the early stages, and still now we are discussing the low-level elements of the technology because it's very new, so we are discussing like the inner workings of the technology. But we are in a process of creating abstraction layers on top that will abstract these complexities of the low-level protocols, so developers particularly, they can focus on the business problems and not on the technological problems. So the technology is maturing to a place where we are building libraries so developers can have the building blocks, for example, of financial operations, an escrow contract, abstracted in a way they only need to assign the parties involved in the escrow, the asset at hand, and certain rules, and they don't need to program a low-level smart contract that is very complex, that is very, if you will, critical in terms of operations, because if you program a smart contract wrong, then you lose money. So it's not. I would say that doesn't fall in the application level. It falls more on the infrastructure level. And Gaurang can tell us the experience, because he had to, as he jumped early on, he had to build everything like from scratch.
Exactly. So I think, Malcolm, to answer your question, I think the education is going to fall into two categories. One is at the very low level, where people are learning how to build the tools, right? So Antonio, my colleague, he used to do workshops in London. They used to teach people how to write secure smart contracts. They used to teach them how to work on the EVM layer of the blockchain, right? But not all of them need to learn that, right? So we are going to be partnering with UCL in London, University College London, and they have a course on blockchain only for management executives. And these courses, they focus on how to use the tools and how to actually apply it in your business and your real life use cases. So I think these will be the two broad categories. One is learning how to build the tools, and second is how to use the tools.
I think just to add to that as well, I mean, the base layer of education for sort of younger kids is one relevant element, but definitely at the high executive level, it's a huge gap at the moment. So, this example I was talking about earlier, these central banks, I mean, the European Central Bank and the Bank of England, they were saying, of course, we're very attracted by all of this, but, what solution is it providing us? We don't really know that it's providing any solution. Now, if you sit down with a bank and you take them through like functioning sort of blockchain analytics and what that can actually do, what you're effectively coaching a central bank is that they can do away with any cash-related transaction that's untraceable in the world. So you would be able to track and trace every single transaction on any single wallet, on any single individual, and everything related to that. And some of them just don't understand that. It's a really, and that happened a generation ago with the internet, because there were many banks, 20 or 30 years ago, whatever it was, saying, the internet will never touch this bank. That what is the point of granting someone access to their bank account through a computer? That makes no sense whatsoever. Many of those banks, failed and don't exist anymore. Many of them sort of evolved and are arguably ahead of the game. But I'm always trying to encourage that sort of senior level groups or larger institutions actually learning what it can help them accomplish. And that's
and I would say that's a key point. Is like not so in the business side. It's not so much teaching about how the technology works, but why it's relevant. What's the driver of adoption? Is like, are you looking for interoperability? Are you looking for openness? Are you looking for efficiency on the operational sides? Those are the questions that business people willing to maybe approve the development of a project need to understand before they make those decisions. And I would say that's the place where more information and understanding is lacking.
Yeah. Which brings us very tidily back to the announcement that we made today, which Coinsilium announced to the market, which was an investment from IOV into Coinsilium, backing up an MOU for a joint venture in Singapore, where Eddie, our CEO, is going to be based, and also I think starting that process of including education in the adoption and of the products. And that, I think, is a huge job, a huge task. I mean, we both probably thought it was a good idea, because I think one thing we share in common is if we think it's a good idea, we go for it, and then we think about worry about the challenges along the way. But ultimately, how do you see that process and the scale of the opportunity? And then sort of coming back to Gibraltar afterwards, but that's obviously a large market, but we've also got the potential, because of the willingness and the commitment that Gibraltar's putting in to do things on the ground here. So, you've got potential clients there, but you've got a jurisdiction that's going to actually make itself walk the walk. So maybe those two questions sort of take separately, they're in two different chunks. But let's start with the first one, and then maybe you can have a discussion about the both.
I think, well, Asia is clearly the fastest growing market in the world, I would say, today. So I see a huge opportunity interconnecting the Western with the Western hemisphere with Asia, and streamlining that process. And I think one of the key use cases, aside financial inclusion, for these technologies is international trade. I think in international trade, you have a system that it's the global system is a SWIFT system. The banking system is kind of outdated, very inefficient. It can take several days to do an international transfer. It's intermediated by one country in particular. So it acts also has like some political element to it. It's not a neutral financial tool. And I think these technologies can enable actually a true open platform for international trade that will be much more efficient and open. So I see these tools put in that context, in international trade operations. Asia, in that sense, is a little bit particular, because if you go around, for example, payments, they already have, in China, everybody that has a smartphone has already a very efficient payment system. So I would say is more about using the blockchain to interconnect Asia with the rest of the world than actually solving the fintech or financial problems inside, because they are well advanced in terms of payment processing with the population and those things. And even in lending systems, they have a lot of AI-based lending systems, so they are much more advanced in those areas, but there's a lot of opportunities in connecting Asia with the rest of the world, so I see opportunities there.
It's also like you say, international trade, but international payments, even at a very basic retail level. I think you've used an example before, which was like in the olden days of telecoms, my local mobile phone call was much much cheaper than an international call, and a further international call was more expensive, and then a call to Australia was even more expensive, and the payment system kind of still works like that a bit today. So an whatever Revolut transfer in between users is at zero cost, or WePay transfers all work at no cost. But then if you're based in London and you're sending a payment across to your family in Argentina or wherever, India, it doesn't matter. It's 7.5%, it's 9%, it's incredibly inefficient and expensive systems for intercompany payments. And that's another, arguably solution of the use of the technology.
Absolutely. I think remittances is it's a 600 billion market per year, so I think there's a huge opportunity there as well.
And so getting back to the early question, which was the vision, what would you like to see, or what you imagine practically you'd see Gibraltar meaning for the rest of the world, and what will the jurisdiction look like with all your dreams come true about what you, and our dreams, should I say, about what it can offer and what we should be offering from here?
That's I think I started talking about sort of an industry, a wider industry adoption of the technology. So I read an article 2 weeks ago, and I heard about Julius Baer doing a deal with Bitcoin Suisse in relation to custody solutions for BTC and their clients. So I would love to see the banking industry here looking at that and adopting certain roles and uses of adding an entire new global asset class to some of that. Not to say that everyone should be buying everything and holding their entire savings and something like that, but seeing that industry evolve, seeing the gaming industry that's so significant here evolve in the use of the technology in many different ways, and they already are arguably looking at it in different ways. Seeing an efficient insurance-based settlement system, seeing all of these government-related infrastructure projects moving on and adopting. So we have the legal framework, we have an ecosystem that exists, and that exists in a DLT industry. But my dream would be, my hope is that it starts to infiltrate and have effect on other industries that are relevant to the jurisdiction. Yeah.
Yes, I think we have a unique opportunity to turn Gibraltar into the leading jurisdiction for this, because the regulatory framework is already amazing, is very well thought. So now it's a matter of creating implementing use cases that will help people in day-to-day lives or industries like Joey was mentioning. So if you ask me, I would like to showcase the world what can be done with this technology, and then afterwards help the other jurisdictions join. But I think in the web days, I spend many hours, hundreds, thousands of hours explaining why the web was relevant, why it was going to change the world. And then I realized that the best way to evangelize people is giving them a tool that improves their life. So I would like to see those tools being applied here in Gibraltar, improving the life of Gibraltarians, of Llanitos. and then, with that, I think we can showcase the world what this technology can do for people, and then the rest will be history.
Well, I won't put you on the spot, Gaurang, because you only arrived in Gibraltar yesterday. And you came the weekend.
I love the weather and I love the Llanitos.
But is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think I would like to keep coming back to Gibraltar. It's a welcome change from London. It's not drab and cool. So yeah, but I think as Gibraltar, we have a unique opportunity to attract more startups like RSK, like Coinsilium, and maybe someone like Indorse as well, and other companies from the European jurisdictions, definitely.
Okay, so again, thank you to the sponsors, our venue partner here at the Sunborn, the university, who has always supported us and is now offering a professional certificate of competence in blockchain next month, also supported by RSK. And I can keep rambling on for a while, but you know.
Once again, thank you, Denise, for organising it. Thank you for the panel guys, to my colleagues from the panel who I know better than than just to have a panel session here, although we've not actually done this before, I don't think, the four of us. But thank you very much for agreeing to participate and support, and for all of the support you've given Coinsilium. Thank you.
Thank you.